Okay. Forgot to start the recording. Session 4. Today we're going to talk about communication, passion. I have found as a pastor that communication is always a challenge. I found that true as a husband and as a father and other kinds of things that relationships we have. It seems like communication is a challenge for us. Clear communication will help us in all of our ministry. The Word of God says, whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. Colossians 3:23. That is, do it with passion. Have you ever thought about why some people succeed where others have failed? Why are some able to accomplish more with less resources than others? Why do some accomplish more in a single year than others do in a lifetime? I don't believe it is because of intelligence or education or giftedness or training. We all know that those that have been blessed with tremendous intellect and vast opportunities, but have not lived up to their potential. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of potential, but they don't get very far. Why? Well, the notes suggest to us that it is passion. Passion is the fire in our belly, deep inside, that separates mere contestants from winners. Just think about if you run a race, like a track race or something. If you don't have the goal in mind and if you don't push hard, you won't be in the front. You've got to have that drive, that passion. Passion not only gets you going or doing, but also keeps you motivated. It is often the deciding factor between average and outstanding. Unfortunately, it is all too common for pastors to lose their passion after a few years in ministry. Well, that's true, it seems like. When a person graduates from like the Bible college, they're so excited, they're ready to win the world for Christ. After about 2 or 3 years, they've been out in the real world and they found out that ministry is not so easy. And then it's hard to have that same vision and drive. So how do we keep that passion that we first had? How do we keep that going? Here's the question. Why do many lose the passion that makes all the difference? So our notes suggest 4 reasons. Number 1 is routine. In the predictable routine of life, they have allowed something precious to become familiar. They've adopted the attitude, been there, done that, about their ministry and leadership. Walter Chrysler once commented, "I feel sorry for the person who can't get genuinely excited about his work. Not only will he never be satisfied, but he will never achieve anything worthwhile." We have routines in life, so how do we keep that excitement going? As a pastor, we have a weekly schedule. We have Sunday coming. We've got to get a sermon ready. We have worship to prepare. It's kind of exciting to have some kind of event that we can look forward to, like a district event or maybe a pastor's meeting or perhaps some special training. Or maybe we get to go on a trip someplace to another city. You know, that breaks up our routine, but those are kind of special times. Most of the time, it's just that weekly schedule. How do we keep the excitement that we felt early on? Number 2, acceptance and approval. Passion both draws and repels people. Some are attracted to the laser-like single-mindedness, while others are threatened by it. Sometimes in our desire to be liked, we turn down the heat to an acceptable level. What that means is that sometimes we can overdo it, maybe. Keep it where people can accept and follow and participate in your passion. Because sometimes if our passion is maybe overdone, it might push people away. So we need to draw people with our passion. Apathy increases with age. We cannot prevent the march of time, but we can prevent hardening of the spiritual and leadership arteries. Apathy is not a matter of the mind as much as it is an issue of the heart. As we get older, we may not have the same energy level that we had when we were younger. Although I still do. No, just joking. No, sometimes I feel like, I'm not sure I really want to go do that right now. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes maybe I'm just tired. There's things that we can do to help out ourselves. For example, do some good exercise and eat well. I think those will help us as we get older. But as we get older, we kind of slow down. I have seen some older pastors, and I respect them because of their age and their seniority, but I also wonder, they're killing their churches. It's like, come on, step up a little bit. You got to do something exciting. You got to bring some change in your church. And so it's don't become one of those pastors. No purpose beyond ourselves. Many have lost sight of their vision and failed to see the big picture as it relates to God's kingdom. Their vision has become very narrow, and that's all they see. They don't see how their ministry impacts God's kingdom on a bigger scale. So these things can get in the way of our passion. What burns on the inside ultimately determines what is accomplished on the outside. Jesus said, out of the overflow of the heart, you can see what's on the inside of a person because what's in the inside. They'll act on the outside. So we want the overflow of our heart to be passion for God's kingdom. A passion for those things you hold is the first step to the achievement of your leadership goals. Passion. I think passion is related to vision. Vision is what you see out there before you. Passion is the drive to get to that vision. It's what keeps you going. It's the energy. It's the enthusiasm. It's the drive that gets you to that vision that you have. From all outward appearances, the church at Ephesus was a very solid church. They were relentless in their defense of the truth, their endurance and perseverance. But all the accolades were negated by one small complaint in Revelation 2:4. You have left your first love. The passion of their relationship with the Savior has been replaced with the mechanics of ministry. Wow, that's a good statement, isn't it? Don't allow that to happen to you. Don't let that passion that led you into ministry, that caused you to go through all these courses and to work really hard all those years, don't let that disappear. Keep at it. Peter Marshall said, enthusiasm is not contrary to reason, it is reason on fire. Edward Butler, every man is enthusiastic at times. One man has enthusiasm for 30 minutes. Another man has it for 30 days. But it is the man who has it for 30 years who makes a success in life. 30 minutes, maybe we're watching a ball game. 30 days, then we give up. No, we've got to be in it the long term, 30 years. Okay? We want to be in it for 30 years or more. James Baldwin, fire can't be made with dead embers, nor can enthusiasm be stirred by spiritless men and women. Josh Billings, be like a postage stamp. Stick to something until you get there. Oh, I like that. That's another good bulletin one. Stick that in your church bulletin. Many people fill us all anew with incredible passion, or may God fill us all anew with incredible passion for the task to which he has called us. I'm praying that I will keep passionate about my ministry to my last day. Well, I have met Mark Lowe, and I work with him quite a bit. I think he's a very passionate guy. If you've ever met our regional director, I think most of you have at district assemblies. He's a very passionate guy, so I believe this statement. And it's helped him become a very strong leader, obviously. Okay, so passion. Some of our passion, I think, is related to maybe our physical well-being. If we do not take care of ourselves, if we do not get good rest, if we do not eat good food, if our circumstances are not very healthy for us, it's hard to do that. I find myself being drained if I don't keep myself in good shape, and if I don't if I don't get fresh air. It's like right now, just being locked up and not being able to get out very much, I think it's very draining and depressing to me. I'm staying very busy. I mean, I have more than enough to stay busy, but this routine, I think, it's kind of getting to me a little bit. I don't know if you have that same experience. I find this quarantine time is it's almost depressing. I love my family. I get to spend a lot of time with them, but it's just challenging not to get out and just do things or go to the store or see the people in the church or the community. I was very busy before all this started. We had a work group that came to our church from Korea. 53 people came and worked around our buildings. And wow, I was going, like 18 hours a day, just nonstop. And it was very, very busy. And then all of a sudden this happens, and it's like everything comes to a standstill. Maybe it's a good time for me to rest also. But I think we've got to keep our passion driven. That raises another question too. I wish they would have put in here someplace the idea of rest and Sabbath. If you don't find times to rest and to clear your head and to spend time with God and to rest your body, it's very difficult to keep that passion going. I'm thinking especially of our bivocational pastors. In a way, I'm also bivocational, but my other vocation is still ministry through the education and the field work I do. So I'm not really a full-time pastor. But I don't have to go out in the community to work someplace to earn my income, because it comes through the missions and so on. But it's easy to just keep going day after day after day after day. For example, if you are a bivocational pastor and you have to teach in a public school, or you have a business that you run, you're doing that all week. You're busy. You got to have that income and keep your business running and so on. And that's great. Paul the Apostle was bivocational. So, you have your job, and then it comes on Saturday, or probably for some of us it's Saturday. Maybe, hopefully you work throughout the week on your sermons and ministry. But Saturday tends to be a fairly busy day. And then Sunday, it's all day for some of us in ministry. When do you rest? When do you find time to quiet yourself? And then to add on top of all of that, you have your family, if you're married and if you have children. And that becomes even more challenging. And then you keep adding on, you take your field team courses. When do you find time for that? Then you've got to take care of your food and shopping and community requirements. And soon you have absolutely no time for rest. Anyone feel like that sometimes? That can become very draining to us, and it can lead to burnout. How do we fight burnout? Well, I think my suggestion for you is just to schedule quiet time for yourself. Even if it's 30 minutes in the morning or late at night, or find some time to just get away. Also, if you're very busy like that, that's when it's really important to take care of yourself physically. Because your body is like a battery. And if you just keep constantly pulling from it and you never replenish it, it's going to drain you slowly. You may not see it at first. For me, when I get tired, I begin to get more stressed. And when I get stressed, my patience goes down. And if my patience goes down, then it's easier for me to get angry or react to my family or situations. That's because I'm just getting depleted, and now I'm starting to get into survival mode. And I'm just going to react anyway just to keep myself alive and going and doing my jobs. So it'll drain us after a while. And I have seen some pastors, I won't name names, but I know several personally who have left the ministry because they burned out. And I don't know all the reasons. They didn't tell me all the reasons. But I think one reason why is they just got drained after a while. The passion and the vision begin to go away. And if you don't have that, as this chapter talks about, if you don't have that passion and the vision that we talked about the other days, very soon you're just getting to the routine of things. You become apathetic. You might even become a little selfish. So, we've got to take care of ourselves and keep that passion burning. One other thing I might add here that comes to my mind about this topic of passion is if you can find a Christian brother or sister to walk with you and be a friend, maybe another pastor on your district. So when you do have a challenge or something, your friend helps you. I have a friend. He's actually on the other side of the world. I met him at a conference. He's a Methodist pastor in the small island of Bahamas. I met him just at a dinner at a theology conference like 1995. And I've actually only met him in person maybe 2 times, face to face. But I talk to him almost every day on Facebook. And I feel like I know him pretty well. He knows me very well. And even though we don't see each other, we can support each other in our ministries throughout the years for the last, wow, how long is that? 25 years almost already that I've known him. I really want to go see him really bad, go see his church. But he's just a native Bahamian, and small Methodist church, great guy. And, just to walk beside him, and he encourages me about every other day. He's sending me a note saying he's praying for me. And so if you can find someone that you can walk your journey of ministry with like that. A brother. If you're a man, get a brother. If you're a female, get a lady. And someone that, maybe another pastor, it might even be someone on the other side of the world that you meet through Facebook or something. But having those people together, having someone with you will help you during those times, and it helps keep our passion alive. Okay, well, there's a lot of extra information I gave you, but I hope those are helpful thoughts just from my own experiences. Well, before we do jump into this next major topic, which will take quite a bit, I want to pause for a moment and see if you have any comments. Do you have any comments about passion? Keep your relationship with God alive and growing through worship, through studying His Word and prayer. Yeah, when those things start to go down in our life, then we start to open up ourselves to these other problems that we talked about. Yes, thank you very much. That's a really good point. Keep in the Word. Keep in your prayer life. I have found that it's a challenge when we always have to give. You know, we have to come up with sermons and Bible studies constantly, and I've experienced in my life, and I had a pastor not too long ago say, "Well, what do you preach every Sunday?" It's like, I preached everything I know. Well, my answer to him was, well, why don't you just try journaling the Bible like I do? I do a journal every day. I post it on my website. And so it gives me ideas that I can share with people if that's what God leads me to. Stay in the Word. That will help you keep fresh messages coming into your mind and your heart and your life. Don't come to Saturday night and you have nothing to say on Sunday morning. The only reason that might happen is because you haven't been in the Word all week. If you stay in the Word, then you can have a message for the people on Sunday or whenever you have a study. So stay in the Word. Let the overflow of your ministry come from what you are experiencing in your own life, so that your passion, your vision, it's all driven by your relationship with God and how that is developing. Anybody else want to share a thought there? Resume recording. Okay, what are 5 characteristics of an effective leader that you have seen in your life? Perseverance, orderly mindedness, accept criticism. I was going to say about accepting criticism that that's hard to do, isn't it? Because sometimes we take that very personally, and sometimes it can hurt us. So accepting criticism, that's very challenging. Oversight, strong will, that's similar to passion, isn't it? We don't give up. We're strong. Positive-minded, vision, humility, clarity of vision. That's similar. Some similar ideas. Courage and passionate. That's kind of like being a strong will. Determination. Yeah, that's similar, isn't it? Determination. You don't give up. Prayerful and you stand with faith. Maybe we could say, on the Word of God. You stand with faith on the Word of God. And being grateful. Yes, that's especially helpful, or that's especially challenging, I should say, when, okay, I'll add that, Brother Rod.
A mentor.
Being grateful. And then, yeah, that's hard sometimes when maybe we're in a difficult situation or a humble situation where the church cannot support us very much. It's maybe hard to, I think the temptation in that situation is to become bitter. So being grateful, thankful, that is the answer to bitterness. And then humble attitude. Okay. I'll just change that. This was an addition. Leadership based on faith with God through the work of the Holy Spirit. Work of and presence of the Holy Spirit. Pastor focuses on people. Yeah, I heard that quite a few times. Focus on the people. A higher calling as an ambassador of Christ. Yeah. Our salary cannot be compared to this world. I know of very few rich pastors. There are some who maybe do better off if they're at a large church, but I never go anywhere for the money. I've never been paid very much. But God has taken care of me and my family. We have all that we need. Sometimes it's not easy. It's some of the smaller churches where I've been, but yep, we're not in it for the money. We have to trust God. Sometimes that's really hard if you're in a small church that cannot support you very much. And in our day and age, there's lots of temptations, aren't there, about material things. I'm wondering if this time of quarantine is helping us to rethink our priorities. And we realize that there's a lot of things that we don't need. I'm just thinking in my own life, really for this past month, the only thing that we've had to really spend money on besides like our bills that we have to pay all the time is food. I mean, we haven't gone out to shop or anything. So I'm realizing that we don't need all this extra stuff. We just, this is a good lesson about the necessities of life right now. Genuine concern for people. Being more of a doer and a follower, not a commander. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit like we talked about yesterday. You're not going to push your authority, but you're being a person of example. Okay, some challenges. Criticism. Yep, that was I think I talked about criticism already. Sorry about that. Criticism. Conflict. Yeah, that's I think a challenge we all face. Whenever you get two people together, you're going to have different ideas. Burnout. Yeah. If you find yourself at a place where you are getting close to burnout, I really encourage you to find some rest. This is a good time too for so many people because we're at home. Sleep in. Take some rest. Refresh your mind. Spend some time in prayer. This is a good time for us. Even though I know it's difficult for us in our churches, it's also a blessing. So think of how God is blessing us right now. Yeah. Brother Rod says, Brother Rod wants to add something here to challenges. I'll paste that in there. Okay, how to preserve and maintain people, how to win people, evangelism and discipleship. That's what these two are about. Yeah, that's the heart of what we do, and it's very challenging. How to send people out to reach others. So how do we evangelize them? How do we train them? And how do we send them out? We want to make disciple makers. That's not easy. Barrier of communication in the culture. That's true. It could be even in your own culture. I find it very challenging. You know, I lived in the Philippines a long time. My Tagalog's not very good. That's because almost 8 of the 10 or 11 years I was at APNTS, and they didn't ask us as a professor, I was at APNTS, they didn't ask me to learn Tagalog very much. So I never did. I was just so busy teaching classes. Last couple of years, I've tried to learn some Tagalog, but it's a very difficult language. So,
But doctor, you can understand Tagalog.
only some of the simpler words.
Okay.
Tagalog has these words that are like 5 syllables long.
Okay.
And it's very hard. So
Just like us.
do you have a
It's
hard
hard to
time?
speak fluent English, but we
Okay.
try.
Yeah. So we learn little by little. Even though if you have the same language, it's hard to communicate with people, isn't it?
Yes, nosebleed.
Like here in the Philippines, we have 87 language.
Yes. I know people from the north who don't know the south. There's people from the
Yeah.
south don't know the north. Okay. So this one is supposed to go up here to number 2, the salary. Okay. So add this right here. What makes us unique as a pastor? We don't have money, but we have needs. But our needs are provided. Yeah. You know, even when we are in a small church, people love us, and I don't know if you've seen this, maybe you've experienced it, but people in your church may bring you some food item or something like that. I just 2 weeks ago, we've taken some food out to some different people in our church. So we took food out to an old man, and I took some food out to an older man in the church, and the next day he brings us food. It's like it's hard to share food with someone when they bring the food back to you. But anyway, it was kind of a thoughtful thing anyway. Okay, self-development. Don't be stagnant, but develop yourself. Passionate reading the Bible and do according to what it is doing. Yeah, we can't give up on our Bible reading, even if it's just a little, 1 verse a day. When I was a full-time pastor, when I was doing Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, all of those were major Bible studies and messages. And then sometimes I would have other Bible studies that I was doing. It was really hard to find my own personal time to spend in the Bible. And then I realized, you know, why don't I let my Bible study preparation be what I do personally? So when I'm preparing a sermon, it's my own Bible study. And then I'm sharing with the people the overflow of what God is telling me and growing within me. So when I prepare a Bible study, it's not just a job I have to do on Sunday morning, but it becomes my own personal development and Bible study time. So if it means that I study the same passage all week, great. I'm in the Word. I'm studying it. And then when it comes time to share with the church people, it's not just a speech that I put together, but it's really the overflow of what God has been teaching me in the Bible all week. Great ideas. Anything else anyone would like to share? Okay, here's an addition Michelle wants to add, so let me bring that up to question 1. Okay, an effective leader must as well be innovative. Okay, innovative. So every activity or everything we do excites us and our followers. Innovation sometimes keeps our passion burning. Yeah, that's a good insight. Thank you for that. Innovation. How can we be innovative? Maybe how? I think someone put in here self-development down here. We see that. That's one way we can do it. How? We need to stay growing. Self-improvement. Education. Maybe another one I would add here is dialogue with other pastors. Sometimes my best ideas have come from somebody else. And or maybe in the midst of a conversation, a dialogue with other pastors, it's like all of a sudden the light comes on in my own head. It's like, yeah, I could do that. Or maybe I see what God is doing in your church. I wonder if we could do that. Innovation, dialogue with other pastors. Okay, this is great discussion. Any ideas? Other ideas? I'll share this and send it to you. Actually, I think I can save this. I think I can send this to you, but I'm not sure if I can send it through the oh, just a minute. It looked like 2 people are joining us. Okay. Okay, I went and grabbed 2 books that I just had sitting on my shelf. This one we're going to go over quite a bit. A lot of the next part of the class notes are on this book by John Maxwell, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. This is a pretty popular book. I mean, people have read it all over the world. Okay. And then this one I just happened to see right by my John Maxwell book. This one's produced by David White. He was a missionary in the Philippines for a long time. Printed by OMF. I don't know if it's still around, at least as far as if it's in print. But this is produced in the Philippines. So it's you might be able to find this one. It's got pictures and things like that. It's a little on the easier side for people. It's especially about Bible studies and outreach Bible studies. So do we have an ebook for the Maxwell? I'm not sure, but you can. Let's see. You can find Maxwell on Amazon, and there is a a Kindle version of it. But as far as an ebook, I'm not sure about that. I just looked on Amazon.com, and you can read a lot of the book just this way. Not the whole book, but quite a bit of the book is available for free if you just go to Amazon.com. But we're gonna have a huge amount of it in our notes, so I don't know if you really want to feel like you have to buy the book, but it's just a helpful book. And then someone was asking about the YouTube channel, how to find the YouTube channel for this. I think if you search in YouTube and go to Nazarene, Philippines, course of study, put that in YouTube, and you'll probably find it. So you can do Nazarene course of study. Here's our video from yesterday.
Lord, we just thank you for the time.
Okay. And you can go to my channel, Philippine Micronesia, Church of the Nazarene channel. And you can find different courses there. I also post my church services lately for the last couple months there. I have Principles of Leadership course. And if you go to playlist, then I put here recordings from spiritual formation. Brother Dell has actually been taking that the last 6 weeks. We just finished that. But we had 6 videos that are part of that course. And then Introduction to the Bible. That's one that I just sat in front of my computer and did that one. That one's kind of boring. So if you want to find our class, go to Leadership. So far we have 3 videos so far. And I will post the one for tomorrow there. I mean, the one for today. It is also in our emails. Okay, so Rod says that that book I just showed you, David White's book, Anyone Can Lead, that's still available. I think that's more about small group Bible studies. Okay. Well, that's just a real quick thing there about John Maxwell's book and another leadership book. I'll look in my library. I gave away a lot of my books when I moved last August. Well, let's go back to the class notes now. Okay, everybody see this okay? Lesson 13, Introduction to the 21 Laws of Leadership. If you follow them, people will follow you. Proverbs 28, verse 2. When there is moral rot within a nation, its government topples easily. But with wise and knowledgeable leaders, there is stability. The New Living Translation. The qualifying tests to become a leader, what it takes to become a leadership law. These laws are not based on culture, gender, or age. They are universal. They work everywhere. Number 2, they relate and apply to all communities. And the church is a community. They are recognized by other leaders as leadership laws, and they stand the test of time. Some observations. These laws can be learned. They can stand alone. In other words, every law can stand on its own. Number 3, these laws carry consequences. So if you do them, you'll see results. If you don't do them, there's consequences to it. And number 4, these laws are the foundation of leadership. So John Maxwell, over many years of leadership, he was the pastor of a Wesleyan church in San Diego, California, that was like 3,000 or 4,000 people. And then he's been a leader in his organization for a while, done lots of study. So he's come up with these 21 laws of leadership. What is great for us as pastors is that each one of these laws is based on or comes out of a scripture passage. Remember that one of your assignments is to look at a leader in the Bible and compare them to leaders today. Well, here are 21 examples. You have lots of examples here in the Bible in the next part. Unfortunately, we cannot take time to go through all these Bible passages and read them. It would take us too long. So I'm going to have to more like summarize these because you would just have to go read the book and read these passages on your own. So if there's something that I say in the next hour for today and then tomorrow, I would just encourage you to go follow up and do your own study on any of these. Okay? The first one is called the law of the lid. I have right here in front of me my water bottle, and the water will only go as far as the lid. Take a sip of water there. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. We can look at the story of Saul and David. We're probably very familiar with the story of Saul and David. Saul, the first king, only went so far as a leader, his lid, the top, and then he could not go any further. But David just kept going as a leader. Saul never moved the monarchy beyond a charisma-based judgeship. In many ways, King Saul functioned as the last judge and the first king. He never really organized a lot of things as far as a king goes. He functioned more like a charismatic judge. He was a general, but had no standing army. He had no organized form of government and no means for preserving the gains of his leadership. David comes along, and he's very decisive when he became a king. He methodically chose a strategic center for his capital, Jerusalem, and he took on Israel's rival, the Philistines, and he beat them. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to the capital city of Jerusalem. He sets up his government officials. He structures the kingdom, basically. He does things that kings do. And because of that, the kingdom grew significantly under his leadership. But King Saul, the kingdom only got so far. That's because he had lids. A lid stops things from overflowing and growing. David lifted the lids off of himself and those around him, and he just continued to grow. So that's our Bible example, David and Saul and David. Some observations on this law. The lids that limited Saul. Saul was limited by the lid of fear. Fear will keep us from growing. Saul was limited by the lid of impatience. He did not wait on Samuel. He took matters into his own hands. Wow, sometimes we just need to be patient, especially, and we can learn this in this story, learn this, we must be patient and wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord. Sometimes waiting is difficult, isn't it? We want things done right now. We want our church to be 100 people. We want all the budgets paid. We want all our ministries. We just charge ahead, but make sure that it is God's vision, not your vision. Don't make the mistake of Saul. That was his biggest problem, is he did not wait on God and tried to do things on his own. Saul was limited by the lid of influence. He was not able to encourage or inspire his troops to wait and hold on until Samuel arrived. The verse, but when Samuel did not come, the people were scattering from him. So Saul was not able to keep the people together while they were waiting. Saul was limited by the lid of resources. His army literally ran out of weapons. He did not enlist people who could make more weapons. Saul was limited by the lid of denial. Samuel told Saul that he had been rejected, and Saul continued on as if everything was normal. And instead, the Lord sought out for himself a man after his own heart. Saul was limited by the lid of impulsiveness. You know what that word means? Impulsiveness. That's where you just do things without thinking about it. Another word for that is reaction. You don't even think about it. You just go and do it. And the problem is, it gets you in trouble. In this case, Saul's impulsiveness, he made an oath that almost cost his son's life. He was reckless. He said, "May God do this to me and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan." That's foolishness. Saul was not thinking straight. What causes us to be impulsive? Well, I think a lot of things could cause us to be impulsive. Fear, uncertainty, a lack of clear vision. Sometimes it's our own personalities. We just rush ahead and we don't stop and wait and think through things through. Some people speak before they think. I think a big problem here is his lack of faith. He was not waiting on God. All those things are part that lead to impulsiveness. Saul was limited by the lid of pride. He set up a monument in his own honor. He set up a monument for himself. Saul was limited by the lid of disobedience. He did not completely wipe out the Amalekites, and then he justified it. Saul was limited by the lid of jealousy. He was jealous of David. Saul was limited by the lid of anger. So he did not like what David was doing, tried to kill him. Saul was limited by the lid of deceit. Saul thought, I will give my daughter to David, and then he didn't. Or he offered his daughter in a bribe, and he hoped that David would die in battle. Eventually, the law of the lid became Saul's downfall. When he did nothing about becoming a healthy, more effective leader, Saul was driven to compensate for his deficiencies. So the law of the lid kept Saul down. So fear, impatience, influence, resources, denial, impulsiveness, pride, disobedience, jealousy, anger, and deceit. Wow, no wonder Saul was not a very good king. He made a lot of mistakes. Let's look at what David did. David lifted the lid for himself first. He spent time in developing his leadership, growing up, and he learned good characteristics growing up and spending time with the Lord out in when he was taking care of his sheep. And he knew God, and he had spent time as a young man worshiping God. David lifted the lid for others. He enabled the Israeli army to experience an impossible victory over the Philistines. He stepped out in faith and killed the Goliath, the giant Goliath. David lifted the lid for the whole nation. He lifted the faith of the whole nation. What he did was pleasing in the sight of the people. David lifted the lid before he had an official position. Even though he wasn't king, he was already a leader. So when he did become king, he already had those qualities. I think that's an important thought to think about for our young people. We can be teaching them leadership skills before they actually have an official position in the church. We can start training them to practice and to grow in their leadership. David felt others tried to put their lid on him. Saul and his own brothers discouraged him. His father didn't even show him to Samuel. Others tried to put their lid on him. David had a lid lifter in Jonathan. Their friendship. Jonathan believed in David and even protected David. So if it wasn't for Jonathan, I wonder what kind of problems David would have had. But Jonathan came along and really helped David. And then people recognized the differences between Saul's lid and David's lid. The people saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. People saw David to be a superior leader and a warrior to Saul. Okay, so here's some things. He lifted the lid for himself, for others, for the nation. He was a leader before he was given a position. He did not let other people keep him down. He had a friend who helped him. And then people saw God's work in David's life and his leadership abilities. The law in Scripture. Moses chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided for themselves. How do we live out the law of the lid? Greater success is possible when leadership skills are enhanced. So we want to develop the skills we have and how God has given us strengths and abilities and talents. What are the leadership lids in your life? What is keeping you from growing? It might be worthwhile to think about that for this week. What in my life is keeping me from being an effective leader? Don't use that as an excuse, but use it as an opportunity to grow. How will I lift those lids? What do I need to do? Who are the lid lifters in my life? Is there someone who is close to you who can help you? I think one of the greatest assets or helps that God has given us would be our spouse, if you're married. My wife has been a very big help for me. What have been the lid-lifting experiences of my life? And how do I lift the lid for others? Okay, so a lid is a barrier. It is keeping you from growing any further. So what is it in your life that is keeping you from growing? So you can try to identify those things and then learn how to change them, get rid of them, learn about them, grow with them, so that you can continue to develop as a leader. There'll be some things in this book, in these notes, that'll help as well. Okay, law number 1, the law of the lid. Law number 2, the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Our example comes from Numbers 13 and 14, and it's the story of Joshua and Caleb, specifically Joshua. So Moses sends out the 12 spies into the promised land. They come back with stories, with examples of the produce of the land. 10 of them say that it's impossible. There's no way we can conquer the land. The people there are giants. They have big fortified cities. But then Joshua and Caleb come along, and they say, with God's help, we can do it. This is one of the big turning points in the Old Testament story. And we know that God was displeased with the people. And he said that they would wander around for 40 years in the desert, and no one of that generation would go into the promised land except Joshua and Caleb. They were the only ones who had faith. So what can we learn from this story? The law of influence. Joshua's influence grew because of his relationship with Moses. This is a good example of mentoring in the Old Testament. Joshua was there with Moses all the time, from the early days of the Exodus. And Joshua watched Moses, learned from him. Can you imagine being the assistant of Moses? I mean, this is one of the top 5 heroes of the Bible. And Joshua was learning from the leadership of Moses. Moses later imparted authority to Joshua. And then we find out that later Joshua takes the spot of Moses as the leader. Joshua's influence grew because of time and maturity. Joshua shared the same words in Numbers 14 that he did in Joshua 18. The difference was that those words were spoken later to a new generation from a mature Joshua. Joshua still had the same attitude of faith, but he was older, wiser. He had been through a lot. And so he had grown over those years. He hadn't changed in the sense of leaving his convictions. He had grown in his convictions. Joshua's influence grew because of timing. Sometimes a leader has little influence until their followers want to go somewhere. Only when the Jews tired of circling the desert did they heed the words of Joshua. Sometimes we have to wait for people until they're ready to move. Just think about that idea in your church. Your people may not be ready yet, but that doesn't mean you cannot prepare, and you can do your study and your praying, and you can cast the vision, but be ready when the timing is right and they're ready to go with you. Joshua's influence grew because he possessed patience and integrity. He was consistent, and he had courage, and he stayed true to what God had called them to do. And he stayed with the people. He says, just as Moses has been with you, I will be with you. Joshua's influence grew because he was right. His words stood the test of time. His message never changed, and eventually everyone saw that he was right. Make sure, if you have something big like this, make sure that you are right. Study, prepare. I should say pray, study, prepare. That's better. Put prayer first. And make sure that whatever you're going to lead the church in, make sure it is right. And with God's blessing and with careful research and preparation, then you go to your board meeting with confidence and conviction, because you know that's what God is leading you and the church to do. Don't make it your own opinion, but make sure it is right. Myths about leadership and influence. Joshua and the management myth. Leaders may manage, but managers aren't leaders. That goes back to our very first session. The people of Israel, they did not need someone just simply to manage things, but they needed a leader. Who were the managers? I think the managers were much lower down, like people manage their families. Deuteronomy chapter 6 tells how the Israelites were supposed to teach their children God's laws. Write them on your forehead, have them always before you. Write them on your doorpost, have them on your forehead. The great Shema, Deuteronomy chapter 6, 4 through 9. So a father was, going to manage the affairs of the family and so on. They're still a leader. Joshua needed to be a leader, not just simply say, your tribe, you go camp over there. You go over there, you go over there. Let's set up the tabernacle right there. He needed to have the big vision. He had to have strategy and cast the vision for progress. Joshua and the entrepreneurial myth. Leaders may be entrepreneurial, I can't say that word, entrepreneurial, but entrepreneurs aren't necessarily leaders. This big fancy word means you're able to invent and to create new things. Joshua was not a freewheeling entrepreneur, but a leader. He would not move forward without the people, despite his and Moses' frustration with them. He needed to wait for the people. He waited 40 years. Just because you come up with a great idea, it doesn't mean you're a good leader. You've got to wait for the right time. A good idea does not make you a good leader. Joshua and the pioneer myth. Leaders may be pioneers, but pioneers often are not leaders. Joshua was not Israel's first leader. He grew up with a pioneer, having been mentored by Moses. He, however, was the second generation leader who followed the pioneer and understood the difference. Being first may not mean you take others with you. Joshua was not the first leader through the desert, but he was the one who finished the job. Number 4, Joshua and the knowledge myth. Leaders are knowledgeable, but knowledge doesn't make a leader. We may be smart and be able to read books and do good in our studies, but that's no guarantee that we're going to be a good pastor. In fact, in my many years of teaching at the seminary, for colleges, on districts, sometimes the best pastor was not the best student. Sometimes the best students make terrible pastors. Knowledge is not going to make you a good pastor or a good leader. Now, if you're going to be a pastor and a leader, you should have knowledge. But there's so many other things that make a person a useful and good pastor. Joshua undoubtedly possessed great intelligence, but his leadership was driven by his heart, not his mind. We need to lead with our hearts, but we have our minds engaged. Number 5, Joshua and the position myth. Leaders may hold important positions, but a position doesn't make a leader. We talked about that one already a little bit. Just because we are given a position, pastor, district leader, Sunday school teacher, that does not mean that we are a leader. We've got to, if we're given a position, then we develop as leaders in that position. So Joshua, although he was put in that position, he was growing as a leader. The law in Scripture. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Follow me as I follow Christ. Therefore, knowing the fear of God, we persuade men. So we want to be people of influence, who we are as leaders. We want to make an impact wherever we go in the church and in our ministries and in our communities. Self-evaluation. What is the level of my influence with the leaders of my organization? Do you feel like the church is following you? Do you feel like you need to develop their trust more? Your influence will be small when you first go to a church, but it will grow over time as people learn to trust you and follow you. And so we could go back to the 5 levels of leadership from lesson 2, but we can just see how if you continue to develop in your organization or your church, then your leadership will grow and your influence will grow. For Joshua, it took most of his life as a leader of the people of Israel. Okay. Moving right along. We'll pause after a while to do some discussion. Law 3, the law of process. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. Our example now is Joseph. As a teenager, young Joseph had a divine dream. God revealed to him that he would one day be in a significant leadership role. Even his older brothers would submit to him. However, years of preparation were required to get him ready. His early pride and immaturity had to be chiseled away as he became a man worthy to live out those dreams. Joseph progressed from the pit to the prison to the palace. Oh, there you go. There's a 3-part sermon for you. pit, prison, palace. Every location representing a growth step for him in the process. He was becoming the leader God intended him to be. He was 30 years old when he became Pharaoh's assistant. At least 23 years had passed between the pit and the palace when his brothers visited Egypt to get food for him. He was a changed man. The preparation was not an event, but a process. He was preparing a simmering pot, not a microwave. How do you like that image? There's a good sermon illustration. Simmering pot, not a microwave. It was a marathon, not a sprint. Wow. Before we get into this one, let's not look at the other ones. Just think about this, okay? In your life, have you seen how God has prepared you for where you're at right now through what you've experienced earlier in your life? Whatever your experiences have been, God has been teaching you for the ministry you're at right now. Maybe I'll say more about that in a minute. Observations about this law. Joseph needed time to mature. When God first revealed his dream to Joseph, young Joseph was only a teenager. No doubt he had leadership gifts, but they were in a premature state. It takes time for us to mature and to grow. God may gift people with certain leadership potential. Maybe that's what the idea of leadership. Leaders are born or not born. Well, I think some people may have certain gifts and talents. Think of someone like the prophet Jeremiah. God said, I knit you together. I called you from the womb. So Jeremiah, the prophet, God was already planning something for Jeremiah, even in his mother's womb. But Jeremiah had to be obedient and to act in faith throughout his ministry. He had to respond to God's call, just like all of us do. I think all of us have potential if we will just let God grow within us what he wants to grow in us. Joseph needed time to mature. Well, for some of us like me, it's taken me 53 years. Don't wait till you're 53 years old, okay? Start when you're younger to mature. Joseph needed to be tested and broken to resolve his pride issues. We don't want to experience that, but sometimes God may bring things like that in our life. A time of testing. But those times of testing will make us stronger. Joseph knew that that self-promotion can never replace divine promotion. Trust in God and let him open the doors for you. I have known of a few pastors, I won't name names, who have been self-promoters. You know, they put things on Facebook, or they do this or that, and maybe when you see them, they have this sense of they're trying to make themselves look good, and that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. You know, I just don't like to be around people like that. I like people who are humble, they work hard, God blesses them, then we'll elect them to the district office. I don't want someone who is going around, what's the word? When you are a politician and you try to get elected, the word is, I forget the word right now, but they go around and promote themselves. Wow, my brain just went dead. But oh, someone help me. What is the word when you're trying to get elected and you go around?
Campaigning.
Campaign. That's it. Thank you.
Yo.
My brain just went dead. Campaign.
Yes.
I don't like it when people campaign to be a district superintendent or to be on the district advisory board or to be elected for that. No way. I'm never going to vote for those people. I want someone who is humble and gifted, and then I'll elect those people. I don't want people who say, "Oh, why don't you elect me? You know, I make a good DS." No. That's my opinion. Don't be a self-promoter. It turns people off. It turns me off. You know, let God promote you, and He will, in His will and in His purposes. Okay, that was a little, what do you call that? A soapbox. Sorry about that. That's just my opinion. Joseph determined to value difficult people and to treat them as divine instruments. Value difficult people. Every church that I have been part of, including this one, there are sometimes, or always, I should say, there's always difficult people. And it's not that they're bad people. They just might have a different opinion than you. Let me share just a little story with you about this. In one of my churches, I followed a pastor who was there for many years. He was there for a long time. And then I came and followed that pastor. And in the midst of things, this pastor shared with me, I think in an email or something, and he kind of warned me about such and such a person. He said that they were difficult to deal with. Well, I have to be careful because I don't want anyone who knows about this situation to share about it. So I have to be careful how I share this story because some of the people are still around. But in this story, so if this was not being recorded on the internet, here, I'll tell you what, I can solve this really easy. I will pause. Whoops. I will pause the recording. How to deal with difficult people. Love them, value them, treat them as God's instruments. I have found in my pastoral ministry that if I have some people that are difficult to work with, if I love them and accept them, walls come down. And so as a pastor, I don't want to build up walls with people. I want to knock them down. How do you do it? You love them. You value them. You go visit them. You get to know them. Find out why are they difficult. It might just simply be that they had a difficult experience in the past and they have not gotten over it. Maybe they got hurt in the past and they carry around that burden. You can help them get rid of that burden. But you know, also, I have had to deal with difficult people who are just difficult. I have no idea why they have a negative attitude. You know, they're just negative people. And so we just need to love them unconditionally. Yep, Paul the Apostle wrote that love extinguishes, thank you, Francis, it extinguishes those things. And Romans chapter 12 is where some of that comes on, where you can see that. It heaps coals on their hot heads. Yeah, thanks for that idea. Okay, that's enough on that topic. I think you know what I mean. So Joseph is a good example of that. Let's go on. Joseph knew that God could never use him until he was tested and proven. Joseph was tested many times, and he passed the test. Think about when he was confronted with Potiphar's wife and the temptation, and he overcame that temptation. He endured stress and calamity, but he grew through all those experiences. If you are going through a difficult time in your life right now, just think and ask, God, what are you teaching me through this? You could go look up Romans chapter 5, and their suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. How do you form character? You form character through your times of testing and trials. Joseph could see his role in the plan of God in Egypt because of the law of process. Joseph knew that God was directing his journey into leadership. When he revealed his identity to his brothers, he said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." So Joseph, reflecting back on his life, he saw what God was doing through all those difficult times. It would have been easy for Joseph to be bitter, wouldn't it have been? You know, your brothers throw you into a pit, you become a slave, you're thrown in prison. It would have been very easy to have a bitter heart. But Joseph looked back through there and he saw how Romans 8:28, God turned the bad into good. Joseph illustrates the 4 phases of leadership growth. Phase 1, I don't know what I don't know. When Joseph was 17, he began to receive messages that he was special and that God was going to use him in an unusual way. His father favored him and gave him a coat. Then he had a dream about his future leadership. He mistakenly shared it with his jealous brothers. They didn't like it and began to grumble against him. But he did understand what was happening. Or did he understand? He had no clue. He had a second dream and shared it with his family. All of them struggled with it, including his dad, his tai. Joseph was on the road of leadership preparation, but was unaware of what he didn't know. I think the point here is that Joseph didn't know what God was doing in his life. Joseph didn't know how to handle the situations very well. And through it all, he got himself into trouble with his brothers. So at first, you don't really understand what's going on. You don't know. Second phase, though, is that you come to know that there are some things that you don't know. Try not to get lost in all this. I know what I don't know. So here, Joseph, and when he's a slave, he goes to the second phase of leadership growth. He begins to be aware of what he didn't know. God was with him, and all that he did was successful. It was in this season, however, that he was betrayed by his colleagues. Potiphar's wife, the king's cupbearer, and his baker all revealed their true colors, and Joseph got a lesson in human nature, relationships, and leadership. He couldn't understand their deceit or apathy. He questioned how his fellow inmates could forget what they had promised. Nevertheless, he committed it all to the Lord and trusted that God would use it all for his glory. Phase 2, we come to realize that there are things we don't know. Phase 3 is I know and grow, and it starts to show. Joseph entered the third phase of leadership growth at about age 30. He was called upon by Potiphar to interpret the king's dream, and Joseph did so with precision. The dream was about the 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. So Joseph came to understand that and the timing and how to lead the people through that time. So during this time, he had knowledge and insight, and it's through that that he grew and people started to notice, especially in this case, Pharaoh, who put him in charge of more. Okay, so at first, we don't know what we're doing. Next, we realize that there are things that we don't know, and we start to learn. Next, we start to grow through our understanding of leadership, and people start to take notice of it. Well, maybe you are someplace now, you began with number 1 before this class. Unless you've studied some leadership, maybe you have. But let's say you had not really studied leadership. You don't know anything yet. Well, this class is helping you to know there's things that you need to go study and follow up on. Then I hope in a few months or by next year, you're starting to implement these ideas. And it's starting to show. People in your church are taking notice. And things are changing now in your church. You're growing. Phase 4, I simply go because of what I know. By this final phase, Joseph was in midlife. He operated out of years of leadership, wisdom, and experience. He was intimate with God and possessed a divine perspective on life. His leadership flowed and was second nature to him. In fact, as he distributed the food to people groups from all over the earth, his own family came to see him, not knowing he was in charge. The dream he had told them about as a teenager had come to pass. Now the ones who had doubted him, physically beat him, and sold him into slavery were in need of his help. This was his chance to take revenge. Everyone in Egypt would have understood. But he didn't. He forgave his family. He gave them food. He even responded with his little brother. He was no longer the little brother, but Joseph. His action flowed out of a character. He did what was right, even when it was difficult. So at this phase, now you are a mature pastor. You have studied leadership for many years. You have implemented it in your church. And now it has become second nature to you. And it has become who you are. You are a leader. And people see that in you. You don't have to work at it so hard. Continue to develop, of course, but it's who you are. And now you respond in your ministry as a leader. The law in Scripture. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret for evildoers will be cut off. But those who wait for the Lord, they will inherit the land. The steps of a man are established by the Lord. He delights in his way. While the earth remains seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Behold, the farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets to the early and late rains. You too, be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. As an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we count those blessed who endured. You have heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealing, that the Lord is full of compassion and is merciful. Living the law. We overestimate the event and underestimate the process. It's not just simply being a pastor, but it's growing as a pastor. Okay, a few more things here. Leadership is many faceted. Takes skill, experience, maturity, relationships, timing, culture, training, and attitude. That's a long list. So you can develop skills. That's going to be something that you can work on yourself. Experience, that just comes with time. If you're a new pastor, 1 or 2 years old, you've got some experience now, but there's a lot of things to learn still. I've been a pastor in different settings for 15, 20 years. Probably more like 15 or 16 years. There's a lot of things that I need to learn as a pastor. Every place I go, I learn. Maturity. Maturity is not necessarily age related. Do you know someone who is older, but who really is immature? But then you know of a young person who really has a lot of maturity. When I look in the Bible and I study people like Timothy, Paul says, don't let people look down on you because of your age, your young age. Timothy was on the young side. When Paul recruited him for his missionary journeys, he may have been a late teenager. Probably not 20 years old yet. If he was, early 20s at the most, but he was probably under 20 years old when Paul recruited him to be a missionary. And then, so that would have been maybe in the late 40s, maybe around, probably late 40s. Throughout the 50s, Paul sent him on a lot of difficult assignments. He sent him to Corinth, which was a divided church. He sent him to Ephesus, which had false teachers. He sent him to other churches, other situations. Timothy was with Paul later on when he was in prison. Timothy and Paul, that's the closest relationship we see in the early church between those two. Well, if Timothy was out doing those things and he was under 30 years old, he had a lot of maturity, spiritually, psychologically, and in his leadership skills. Relationships really matter, and we need to develop those. Timing, and then culture, learning the local culture. Even if maybe it's our home nation, home country. Every church, every community has its own culture. Every barangay in the Philippines, there's little nuances in our community, and if we can pick up on those, it'll be really helpful in our ministry. That I would also add there that every church has its own culture. If you've been to a lot of different churches, or if you visited churches, if you get a chance to visit other churches at times and watch them, you can see the little differences in the churches. Sometimes it's because of the pastor. Sometimes it's because of certain history of the church. I've been to some churches where everyone gives you a hug and it's just so friendly, and other churches you go in and it's very quiet, very reverent. That's kind of their culture. That's how they worship. Learn the culture. How do you do that? You learn to listen for a while. Training. Okay, important part of leadership, and then attitude. The secret of our success is found in our daily agenda. Do you make up a daily agenda? Well, I don't always write it out, write out a paper. I do have a file on my computer of my to-do list, but I only put the big things there so I don't forget them. But I have in my head, at least, things I want to do today. And so I have them up in my head. I think the idea here is that, do you have in your mind a process of how to grow? How can you become a more effective pastor, leader, whatever position you may have in your church? How can you become more effective? What steps are you going to take? Okay, well, I'm going to take this field team class, and then maybe I will read this book or do this. So develop maybe like a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, steps that you can take to reach some of your goals. What can be discovered in our daily agenda? Okay, before I say this, so what if I were to ask you to write down everything you did yesterday, hour by hour or minute by minute, and maybe the day before? How about your typical week? Because we've had class this week, maybe it's hard, but let's say your average week. Write down everything you do at the end of the day. What would it tell us? It'd tell us your priorities. How do you spend your time? What's most important to you? If it's not very important to you, you probably will not spend much time on it. Well, let's see. Last Wednesday, I spent 3 minutes in prayer. I read a verse in the Bible. Is that a priority? I gotta be careful now because I'm preaching to myself. We will be able to see our priorities, our passions. We will focus on our passions and see what is driving us, our abilities, our relationships. Perhaps we did not spend any time with our children or very much time talking to our wife or our husband. We can see that when we look at our schedules and our agendas. Attitude, maybe a little more difficult. Personal discipline, emotional qualities, influence level, and vision. That might be a good self-discipline to do sometime. Just at the end of the day, sit down and write out the things that you did that day and think, what does this tell about me? I'm afraid that for many of us, including myself, it might tell me that I'm probably focused on the wrong things. Maybe I'm focused too much on me. Maybe I need to spend more time in prayer, God's Word. Maybe it will show the things that I am neglecting that I need to spend more time with. Well, we've got just less than 10 minutes left. I'd like to give us an opportunity to do some personal reflection.